recording has started. Right, we've got to behave now.
Yeah. Fiona, how you going? Welcome to our webinar today again. So Fiona was at Fiona was at my webinar yesterday. So give us a wave, Fiona. You're the first one in the room. Hey Liz, how you going? Hey Juliana, how you going? Hey Bharati, welcome to the room as well. I'm not sure about you guys. I don't know what it's like in your end of the world, but it's pretty wet and miserable in my end of the world, which is Albury Wodonga. So, and I was just chatting to Alex about the fact that we're sort of in this middle section of Melbourne lockdown, Victoria and Sydney lockdown. So we're like in the sandwich where the meat and the chicken and the lettuce and everything else in the sandwich. For those of you, we're happy in our little bubble, I think. Yeah, that's true, Fiona. It's like we don't go anywhere, which is probably good considering the weather at the moment as well. So, hi, Juliana. So what I'm going to do is just ask as you come in the room where you're from, what your business is, and probably also what you would like to get out of today's webinar before we kick off. So we're going to kick off in about 3 minutes. So I'm just going to pop that into chat as well. So let us know. So if you haven't got a cup of tea or coffee at the moment or a water and you want to go and grab one, we'll kick off in about 3 minutes. So,
well, what do you think? Name company elevator pitch?
So yeah, well, each person could do the elevator pitch as well at the same time. So hey, Paul, welcome. Hey, Brady, good morning. So who in the room so far is in the Sydney bubble? How are you guys going? It just must be just challenging coming on and off. Hey, Paul Mooney, and we've got Paul Bardell as well in the room. So, excuse my spelling mistakes this morning. My fingers are a little bit rusty actually. So, hey Juliana Fashion, I'm about to launch an online brand. I'm in Sydney, staying isolated. Yeah, it seems to be the way. So thanks, Juliana. That sounds really exciting about launching an online brand. So a lot of work in regards to fashion. So well done to you. So if you'd just like to introduce yourself, where you're from, and possibly what you'd like to get out of the webinar today. And then also we'll be doing Q&A at the end of the webinar, and we'll kick off in a couple of minutes if you're still trying to pull life together as well. So welcome, Manuel. It's nice to see you in the room today. Also, feel free to use Q&A for questions today. That way everyone can see the question that's been asked. And if Alex can't answer it straight away, then we'll actually be able to have a look at that for when we, at the end of the webinar in regards to questions as well. Hey, Therese, nice to see you again. Welcome. Hey, Janina, welcome as well. So let's just do some testing, Alex. We've got a minute to go. So those in the room, if you could pop your hands up if you can see and you can hear us. So Alex, you want to say hello as well?
Oh, how do I put my hand up? It's not.
No, you just talk so people can see.
Okay.
Thanks, Manuel. Thanks, Therese. Thanks, Liz. Okay, good. I think everyone can see and hear us, which is great as well.
Lovely.
So that's great. So what we'll do is we'll do some introductions first, and I'll just let you know about the Business Connect program and the webinar. If you haven't actually been to one of my webinars before, just a quick introduction. Hey Liz, good to see your hand up. So my name's Kathy Hyman. I'm a Business Connect advisor with the New South Wales Business Connect program, and these webinars are being bought by that program. So what I like to do is get everyone to introduce each other. You mightn't be in the room and we mightn't be able to see you, which is okay. But if you want to just in chat, let us know who you are, where you're from, and what you'd like to get out of the webinar today. And then also feel free to use Q&A or chat. I'll monitor the chat. Q&A or chat in regards to any questions as well. So the other thing is that we are on the internet. So if one of us pops off or we both disappear, we'll come back. Don't worry about it. We'll be back to see you again. And look, it's really rainy and miserable here today. So hopefully the internet will do what it's supposed to do. But I am from Albury Wodonga and Alex is actually from Sydney. So we're bringing our webinar today with you from both ends of New South Wales, which is really interesting. So, hey, Donnelly, good to see you in the room again. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand you over to Alex now, and it's 10 o'clock and we'll kick off the webinar. Again, if you've got any questions, use Q&A, and really would love to have anyone who would like to speak. We're happy to bring you on, and actually after the webinar, if you want to actually have a microphone that works, and we'll love to introduce you to the room and actually ask questions live as well. Over to you, Alex. Introduce yourself and let's kick off.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much, Kathy. I've just got to say, I met Kathy when she was presenting on her own webinar series. So fantastic business coach, and has taught me so much about business and the do's and don'ts. And how many don'ts was I doing? Never mind. But thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So, little about me, subject I can never get enough about. But basically, I have been working in IT for years and years and years. I have done pretty much every job in IT, from being a hardcore nerd, getting to grips with code of various different flavors and types. In fact, actually, my website, Zeb Binary, I coded every single character of code in that. So, a little bit of an achievement there. But you know, I think as many business people will say, you know, probably best to use your talents in a way that use your time very wisely. But there you go. I've worked for some of the very big names around the world. Hopefully, most of you will know CGI, Vodafone, Fujitsu. And I actually was responsible for the deployment of the largest critical national infrastructure in the UK. So very complex program. It was to do with smart meters. Some parts of that program have got up to 14 layers of encryption, sometimes more. But basically, you know, very customer facing, very much in the media, very sensitive program, and an awful lot of fun with some incredibly clever people. So I've put at the start of this slide deck a list of terms. Don't feel like you have to absorb them all right now. They're there because when I send out this deck, you'll be able to go through and read them. And you know, there's a few bits and pieces like at the bottom, OAIC, just so that people know where to go if the worst happens and if people are potentially in danger from a data breach. Not going to spend a lot of time on that. There we go. So the way that I divide cybersecurity up, and this is very much compatible with the NIST framework, if anyone knows it. NIST, worth looking for on the internet. They're a great corporation who bring together a lot of cybersecurity strategy information. They also manage a lot of cybersecurity data, so worth a bit of a nose. I divide this up into 5 pieces. So we've got the user, the application, the devices, network, and servers. So cybersecurity is about our users. And a lot of people think users sort of somebody external, it's somebody out on the internet. But do remember that you yourself are a user. Your staff are users. The people who are working in your vendor companies are users. They're all people who are managing data, who are throwing data to and from. If somebody passes you an email address, if somebody throws you a phone number, that is personal data that they're actually sharing with you. So do remember that whenever you receive something like that, it's confidential information. It's information that you shouldn't be sharing with the rest of the web. Applications, we're talking about the stuff that you tend to download onto your devices with gay abandon. So whether it's mobile phones from the App Store or whether you're downloading something onto your PC, you've got to be very careful about what you're bringing onto your devices. The devices, we're talking primarily about operating systems. We're talking about what actually runs your applications, what your users log into. Now, you might be a very lucky company to have enough money to be able to issue devices to all of your staff and say, don't log in with anything else. But to be honest, the world is changing. Most FTSE 100 companies are starting to allow people to bring their own devices to connect to their network. Because how useful is it to be able to connect with your smartphone and just sort of go, right, here's my presentation for today, and read through emails and documents, etc., etc. When I talk about network, some people have a separate business network to home network. They might be the same network, but what we're talking about is generally the Wi-Fi that you log into. Now, there's a lot more complexity to that I'm not going to go into today. And when I talk about servers, finally, I'm talking about where is it you actually store your data. So you might store it in Google Cloud. Great, it's a fairly secure infrastructure, but what if your Google email or something gets breached? Well, then somebody's got access to your cloud data. Same with the Microsoft Cloud and various other ones. So you've got to think about where you're actually storing data, which is a massive piece of contention. We're running into things such as terms like grey IT, which is where people are supposed to store data for a company in a particular place, but sometimes download it onto devices because, hey, it's easier. And then probably back it up to a USB, and then the USB gets lost, and yeah. But the big message here is allowing access to customer data may end your business. There are big companies that have been brought down by this. There are big companies that have been severely impacted. Just because we haven't yet seen enormous fines levied by the OAIC in Australia. Earlier, I think it was last year, British Airways had millions of pounds worth of fines because they had a data breach, and that was when they'd actually taken actions. So do be careful which country you're dealing in, because there are different regulations. Okay, UK, the Data Protection Act, Europe, GDPR, they're all pretty much of a muchness, but you do have to be careful about the subtle nuances, subtle differences. For example, in Australia, you have to report a breach if it might negatively impact on somebody, if there's a safety issue concerned. In the UK, you have to report it regardless. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to somebody now. This is Doug. He works hard and has a small company. Doug is time poor and non-technical. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I know I'd rather not be technical sometimes. He uses free tools. So I'm talking about the Google stuff, the stuff that you just sort of grab off the internet, download online, all of that sort of stuff. And he stores his data on various cloud platforms. He tends to work a lot on the train and bus, and in his home office. Most of his customers come through his company website. So I'm hoping that a lot of you started to think about this process of how data gets to Doug and his company through those little bits and pieces. Essentially, he's reasonably secure, but remember, when you're working out in public, if you're working in a cafe or a McDonald's, because they've got free Wi-Fi, it's not just about where your data is going. It's not just about the fact that you're on an open free Wi-Fi that isn't encrypted, and somebody sitting there sniffing packets on that network who's sitting 5 tables away from you with a nice hoodie on, because that's what all hackers wear. They're able to see everything that's being thrown across that network. So do be careful of that, but also think about the guy that's standing over your shoulder. You've got this nice, important, highly sensitive email. Wonderful story. I was working for one of the big computer companies, and their CISO was traveling into London and happened to see somebody he didn't know who worked for the same company, and caught a nice little snapshot of him working at his computer with the laptop open with top secret and highly confidential plastered all over a document that he was quite nicely displaying to everybody in the carriage. So, obviously that person got a very firm slap on the wrist. Fortunately, there wasn't actually anything that sensitive on the screen at the time. But, always think, what are your surroundings? Who's around you? What's the potential for risk here? So Doug's got a problem. Poor Doug. 2 weeks ago, his business was hacked. He doesn't know what data was taken, if the data's still there, has been tampered with, and he doesn't back up regularly. Sound familiar? I'm hoping it does. Well, actually, I'm hoping it doesn't, but I'm sure it does sound familiar. So what should Doug do? So first of all, I'd always say contact a cybersecurity specialist. It might cost money. You know what? It's not going to cost as much money as closing your business. If you get the right person, if you talk to the right people in cybersecurity, it doesn't need to cost you the earth. It doesn't need to be hours and hours and days of consultancy. They will not want to go and have a look at every item on your network. They won't want to do a full cybersecurity scan. They will only do that if you ask them to. If they're saying they must do that in order to assess the threat, show them the door. Quite frankly, as with any company, any sort of business, any enterprise, you get a variety of different people. Most of them are very good, very honest, but know what you're asking for. You're just asking them to put together a plan to improve your security. The importance of that is, something's gone wrong, and if you have to report it to the OAIC, then they will be asking, what actually is it that you've done about this problem? You've identified a problem. Now what? Having a plan is a really, really good weapon to make sure that any potential fines, any potential issues that you suffer in the future, you can go, well, look, I've done the needful. I've done something that actually positively makes us learn from this experience. We didn't believe that we were a target, as most local authorities and government agencies don't believe. But, you've done something really positive there. Prepare a statement for your customers. So Doug's gone away. He's prepared a statement. It says, we've been breached. This is what we've done about it. We've put a plan together and we're going to learn positively. There's no need to sort of throw your hands up and admit liability, and legally you probably shouldn't. But I think it's good when companies do say, look, we're letting you know, we're not sure what's been tampered with, and we're doing the needful to make sure that you are informed. Please change your passwords, please update whatever you need to. It's all good practice. It might be that there isn't actually any need to contact the customers, and this is where you might want to suggest a bit of background investigation by the cybersecurity consultant. What they will do is go and have a look and see if there are any logs available to suggest who breached the system, what they've actually taken. Now, what I think should scare absolutely everybody, particularly in local government, is that 50% of businesses last year reported a breach. Remember that not everybody has to report a breach, and also not everybody will know that there has been a breach. There are figures coming out from the cybersecurity community to suggest in the high 90s that most companies have actually been breached and probably don't even know it. So of the ones that have reported breaches, who's to say that they haven't been breached multiple times? Another lovely little anecdote. I was working for the University of Leicester in the UK. I spent 4 years with them, lovely experience, wonderful people to work with, but obviously a big target for cyber criminals. I was setting up a server. It was going to be a mail server, so it was on a secure subnet. It only allowed email in and out. And what happened was, while I was setting up the server, I noticed that I was deploying watchdogs and things like that. And some of them started coming up with some interesting results. And essentially, within the 5 minutes that I was installing the server software, online during the installation process, it actually found a rootkit. And what a rootkit is essentially malicious code deployed to a server that allows somebody else a backdoor to get onto that server. And it will sit there silently and just allow access to that person. Eventually, they might take advantage of it and use it to attack other systems, etc., etc. So this was a secure network with a firewall, various security provisions in place. But because I was installing the server at the time, the server itself didn't have any security provisions on it. And it got breached, and that's just in 5 minutes. So there's constantly bots and stuff like that sitting out on the internet, sniffing networks, looking for ways to attack, looking for vulnerabilities, looking to intrude. And it doesn't mean that you will actually know that they've even been attacked.
So Alex, just a quick question before we move forward is that Paul has asked, you know, which is some of what you've said there, is that how do we know if we've been hacked?
Good question. You won't always.
Okay.
Sorry, there isn't a nice, oh, well, you know, they'll pop up in your screen. Unfortunately, there are certain things that you can look out for. So sometimes you'll get a slowdown on some of your applications. Sometimes you'll get delays on your internet speed, random traffic coming across your network. All good things to look out for. So odd behaviors. I had one a few years ago with a user machine, and the mouse started jittering across the screen. And it wasn't that somebody else was actually controlling it. It was just that the interference through the network was somehow interfering with the USB connection. So what happened was it was really bizarre. It looked like the computer was haunted, but the mouse pointer would just sort of list across the screen. Just
I've had that happen to me.
There you go.
Not now, years ago. So anyway,
it doesn't mean there is an attack. There are various different causes, but you know, look out for any odd behavior on your peripherals.
Cool. All right. Well, great question, Paul. And there's a few other questions there, Alex, but I'll leave them for Q&A. So I haven't forgotten you guys, okay? And I'll put myself on mute again.
Lovely. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so what should Doug have done? You know, this is the big question. There in 1992, there was a phrase coined, which is about the 110-100 data management rule, and I believe it's actually appropriate cybersecurity. What it meant was, if it costs you $1 to implement a data management plan or a cybersecurity plan, then and do it proactively and maintain it, then it will cost you $10 if you don't plan it and then have to do it later. So even if it costs you right now $1,000 to actually get a good data and cybersecurity plan in place, you'll save yourself $10,000 when you have to correct the problem later. And the scary thing is that if you don't ever correct the issues caused by bad planning, bad data management, it will cost you 100 times that. Now, I was working for FTSE 100, who will remain nameless, and I was assessing a risk that they had because they'd had a load of data that was moving around their systems, and they wanted to know how much it would cost them if there was a breach. So it's a lovely piece of work if you ever look at it. It takes the fairly ethereal sort of, oh my God, what happens if, and turns it into a financial number. So looking at the numbers, we actually decided it would probably cost somewhere around 100,000 to have a specialist, £100,000, sorry, $200,000 to have a specialist sitting there, making sure that the data planning was in place. And we already knew, because that hadn't been the case, that we had to employ 10 people for the course of a year to go and fix everything. So we had those figures, and then we sort of traced through and looked at what actually happened if we never fixed the data issues, if we never fixed the security issues. And it would have cost, absolutely spot on, our estimate was 100 times the original cost. What was scary was when we looked at the regulatory fines for being caught without that in place. Now, they vary, and generally the company was doing the right thing. They'd identified an issue, they'd found a risk, and they were actually addressing it. But it would have cost 1,000 times. So we've actually taken the 110, 100 model, and it's actually now the 110, 100, 1,000 model. So if you get caught and you have never done anything to actually address the problem, it can cost you 1,000 times the original cost of sitting down and actually having a think about this stuff. And that in itself doesn't have to be an expensive figure. It could be as little as you saying, okay, where is my data going? Who's putting data where? How do I actually control that flow? How do I control everything that's going on in our systems? And making sure that when you go and get an app, when you go and get new software, that your vendor has actually thought about security, that you ask the key questions that are needed to make sure they are compliant with what you want. So he should have planned his security before any instance, and he should have thought about the 5 key areas, sort of users, applications, devices, networks, and servers. When you're talking about users, there's multiple things that I've listed. So multi-factor authentication, don't know if anybody's come across this. If you get a Coles order online, you'll probably get thoroughly annoyed with it because you get codes sent to your mobile. They're actually really helpful. It's doing the right thing. It's making sure that you are you. And you might get really annoyed with all of these capture things, sort of pick out the traffic lights, sort of, are you really a human? There are actually advances in capture. That was more capture version 2. I believe version 3 is less interactive. I've got version 3 on my website. And it just goes away in the background and does various checks, sends through a secure code, and then submits that secure code through to my servers when somebody submits some data. So it's sort of, making sure you are actually human and not one of these bots sitting out there sniffing for malicious things to get into. You can also look at things like biometrics. They've come a hell of a long way. We're starting to get things like face identification. Some people have tried to get around it by printing out a photo of their friend, cutting holes in the eyes and putting it over their face. And it works with some cameras, it doesn't work with others, but it's getting more and more accurate. But what you could do is say, I want face recognition as well as thumbprint recognition, as well as a text going to my mobile, as well as a password and a PIN, and all of this. You could go totally over the top and make your systems utterly unusable. But the whole point is to make sure that people are who they say they are. You've also got to remember that the biggest risk that most FTSE 100 and most small companies face is called the insider threat. What the insider threat is, it's multifaceted, but it's basically people's behavior. If people are leaving the keys out on the table, or even out in the road, and welcoming people in to come and steal their data, then it's actually the users that are at fault there. If you get a disgruntled employee who has all the keys to the kingdom, and you have to let them go, they might take those keys with you and use them themselves, hand them over to somebody else. So you've got to make sure that you assess these threats. Now, I wouldn't say being paranoid is good. You've got to balance functionality. You've got to balance the ability for people to do their jobs with security. But there are multiple levels that you can put in place. A lot of big companies are looking at what's called AIM. So, IAM, Identity and Access Management. And what that's about is on an HR system, when somebody comes in and joins your company, it registers them as a user, it sets them up with a profile, assigns certain roles to that person, and allows them access to certain systems in certain ways, sometimes for certain limited periods of time. And these are wonderful systems because as soon as HR goes, that person's been fired, it removes all of their access from every system that they had access to. So wonderful thing, very expensive, probably not something that you're going to be looking at. but get the thinking in there, get the thought processes right, and you avoid problems later. Vendor security, very overlooked. Really big area that a lot of companies miss, including the biggies, I'm afraid to say. What that means is, have you actually done security assessment on your vendors? Some vendors are ISO 27001 compliant. That's a good ISO to look at. What it means is various things, various behaviors. There are aspects in ISO 27001 that talk about where they leave laptops, such as don't leave your laptop in the car overnight. It also comes down to little bits of behavior, such as, do you have a lock on your office door? Do you lock your office door when you're not using your computer? Something a lot of people don't think about. Also, are you using your laptop in the kitchen with your partner standing behind you where they can see various things? I hate to say it, you like to think you can trust your partner, but who knows? Maybe you can trust them today, maybe you can't next week. Don't like to say. But, think about all of these things that your vendor's doing. So you've handed over customer data for them to go and be able to do a piece of work on your behalf. It's still your reputation on the line. And actually, we're finding more and more with the big companies that they're having to take responsibility for the vendors that they choose. So even if it's, I haven't heard of a Google breach, but let's say it's Google that gets breached. Now, on my website and on many other people's websites, they actually download JavaScript at the point that a user comes onto the website from Google. And that's so that my Google Analytics code does stuff in the background. All the wizards cast their spells, and all of a sudden I get data analytics appear on my dashboard. Wonderful stuff. But the problem is, I'm trusting another company. I'm trusting that somebody else out there somewhere has got my best interests. And essentially, if their code gets hacked, I will then be downloading the hacked code onto my website and displaying it for absolutely everybody. So I will be responsible then for a data breach to all of my customers. So do think about what your vendors are doing. If you go and get somebody to develop an app for you, have they actually got your best interest at heart? Have you actually got an independent assessor to go through the code and validate that it's actually not been breached? And actually, I did this with one customer, and they actually ended up moving all of their services over to the assessor who was hired, because they'd actually found various issues to do with compliance of third-party code that vendor had gone off and got from other websites. So libraries and things like that, stuff that was out of support, stuff that had security vulnerabilities. So, you've got to be careful. The last bit there, and possibly the most important, is staff training. Make sure your staff know what they're doing. Make sure they use really nice long passwords. Make sure they use passwords that are actually a composite of things that they will remember. So possibly not your first pet's name and the road that you grew up on. I believe that's used for other purposes as well. But think about putting names together, putting words together. So it could be your full name. Oh, everybody knows that. Yeah, but add on to it. Add on to it the first 3 digits of your phone number. Add on to it the name of your first pet. Go obscure. Go for stuff that only really makes sense to you. Now, the reason for making a password nice and long is if it's shorter than 16 characters, there's actually not only a probability of it being guessed, but also on Linux and Unix systems, when somebody goes to log in, the passwords file, even though it's encrypted, is made available to that user to be able to check the password against. So they take the password, encrypt it, and check the encryption. So there's actually a vulnerability on those types of systems that means that there's a possibility of somebody grabbing the passwords file. Yes, it's still encrypted, but we're getting into days of scary, scary computing where there's so much power out there. With quantum computing, it has exponentially decreased the amount of time that it takes to crack something that is encrypted, which has meant that we've gone from sort of 64-bit encryption past 256-bit encryption, and now a lot of people are looking at 512-bit and so on and so forth, sometimes even more, which means that actually in order to defend our systems, we've got to dedicate more and more processing power to it. What can you do with the applications? Check the data configuration. So check what your application's doing with your data, what they're sharing, what they're storing. Something that not a lot of people do, but on your mobile phone, you can go through and change these things. You couldn't on laptops go in and check the configuration, make sure the boxes are unticked as need be. Sort of data and application configurations, where's it storing the data, what's going on behind the scenes, worth a nose. Only install applications from a reputable source. It might be that if you've got a home laptop that you just install anything you like on, don't use it for business. Get another laptop. It's worth a couple of $1,000 to get something that's nice and high spec that will do what you want for the office, and you keep it absolutely separate. Try to block applications from unknown or suspicious sources. That's a little bit more technical, but do what you can. If you can download an application blocker or something that uses whitelists and blacklists. So whitelists are known authoritative sources of good data and good applications. Blacklists are known bad sources, known sources of malware and things like that. And remove all data that the applications don't need. So if the application doesn't need to know your birthday, get rid of it, take it out of the app. Devices, patch them regularly. I can't stress that enough. People forget to patch devices or go, oh no, I'll do it later, and later never actually arrives. So,
So Alex, yeah. As a doobie, what's a patch?
It's that really lovely, annoying thing that Microsoft keeps popping up in the corner of your computer going, can I download this now? And people get really irritated by it. And it always happens just before you're about to start presenting. I don't know why. And then the system restarts for 20 minutes.
So in other words, update. When Microsoft says you need to update this, update it. I suppose that's the main thing.
Absolutely, and thank you for giving me a break to have a quick drink. I forgot how thirsty it gets while you're presenting. Yeah, so updates, patches, things like that. With apps on mobile phones, it'll normally say, do you want to update this now or carry on using it? And always just click on update it now. Doesn't matter if it's slightly inconvenient or you really want to go and play your games. It might be a critical update. Something that a lot of people might not know is that there are actually standards for the app stores that, such as Google Store or the Apple iStore. They actually will not allow malicious code to go into the store if they can help it. They're constantly monitoring their apps. They're constantly updating them. I get developer reports for a couple of apps that I put out there. They're actually games, but and they say, oh, have you thought about this? So this has been flagged as an issue, and you have to go in and change stuff. Anyway, make sure that you've got the latest operating system version that you can. So a lot of people were resistant to Windows 10 when it came out, but it actually fixed an awful lot of problems to Windows 8. It might be uncomfortable, it may not be the best thing, but if you're going to go down the Microsoft route, just make sure that you've got the latest OS as soon as it comes out of beta testing. Check your configuration again. There's configuration on most operating systems as well as the applications you use. So on your OSs, on your devices, it'll say, what do you want to do with these pieces of data? So for example, on Microsoft, it asks whether you want to upload certain areas to the cloud, to the Microsoft cloud for backup and safety. You might want to say yes to certain files and no to others. Really good practice to have a backup, to have something that is replicated from your machine into the cloud. It will slow down your network a bit when you do something hefty like dump a video onto it. But it's really worthwhile. Install antivirus software. I won't say what's been in the press about McAfee. Have a look; it's really interesting. But more the individual than the company, so you say. But there's a whole array of different antivirus softwares out there. Generally, they actually use the same virus signatures, and what that means is looking for snippets of code that they know are attributable to malicious code. So it's not sort of like, oh, if you get this virus, it will detect it. It's almost like with vaccinations, they look for a signature of a virus, and so if a new virus of the same type comes out, they'll go, oh yeah, I know that one. I know what to do.
So Alex, just a quick question.
Yep.
Liz has asked, are there any antivirus that you sort of lean towards? For a small business, so we're looking at small businesses, so anything from say 5 or under, so that doesn't drain your computer, because I know we're on, sometimes mine drains my computer.
Do you know what? Actually, it is the same answer for small business as large business. Because with large business, it's end computing, distributed computing. It still comes down to individuals and individual users. Kaspersky is nice. Sophos, Sophos, I don't know how you pronounce it usually. McAfee tends to be a little bit draining, but it does the job.
How do you spell that, Alex?
Sorry, which one?
How do you, Sophos? So was it? How do you spell that?
Sophos.
Okay, I'll pop it into chat.
Lovely. Kaspersky is Kaspersky. I'm thinking a few others now.
I think one of the ones that you get with your computer is like McAfee, and stuff like that. So, but what was the other one? Norton. Dee's just
Norton's quite good. Again, I find Norton quite resource hungry.
That's what I found too. It just gets really frustrating. So, what was the one after Sophos that you spelt out, but I didn't get?
Kaspersky.
And how do you spell that again, if you don't mind?
KAS.
KAS.
PER.
PER.
SKY, I think.
SKY. Right, I'll do some Googling on that and put some email addresses, put some WW dots in it. So over to you again.
There are some free ones out there that are actually pretty good. Always look at the reviews, look at Google reviews and things like that. But as I say, they generally tend to take the same digital signatures. There's actually one that I use on my own server, on my Debian Linux server, which is Clam antivirus, which is really lovely and lightweight. It does a scan every day, and it picks up on all of the virus signatures as long as you download them and keep them updated. Again, keep them updated. Install file monitoring software. Now, there's a variety. I've put links at the end of this, but go for something really nice and simple and lightweight, something that just does the job. There are certain files on your computer that will never change. Things like DLLs, dynamic loading libraries, I think that stands for. So on Windows, same for iOS, same for the various Google platforms and all of those. Those files should always remain static. So having something that checks for changes from day to day between those files will give you an early warning. And actually, that's what found the rootkit on the Red Hat Linux server that I was setting up. Encrypt the file system. You may not know what that means. Just a search for encrypted file systems. Essentially, what it is, when your computer boots up, it has to read stuff in clear text in order to know what it's actually doing. But all of the rest of the data can actually be encrypted. So what a lot of these systems do, like BitLocker, is they have a bootloader that gets installed. It then has a look at the encryption key, which has to be stored somewhere, unfortunately. There are options where the encryption key is stored on the server and it's available only to a certain MAC address, etc. So that computer only. And then the encryption key allows the computer to then de-encrypt the whole of the hard drive so it can access that data. You can also have various bits of your hard drive encrypted in different ways, which can be helpful. But I'd say go for the basics. Make sure that it's encrypted, and make sure that you've got a password set on your laptop. There have been so many cases where somebody has left a laptop on a train. This could also be a good case for storing your data, sensitive data in the cloud, because if it's not actually on the laptop and you still have to log in to get to the cloud, you've actually not lost anything. Networks. Enable firewalls, ensure that the highest level of security is used to allow people onto your network. So if you're going to allow people onto your network, make sure that things like WPA2 are used, not WPA1, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into the technology behind it, but these are all layers of security. One on its own will protect you a certain amount. Everything security is about percentages. It's about how likely are you actually to get breached? How likely are you to be able to defend yourself? And every time you turn on one of these options, it actually decreases the likelihood. It's like the old story of the man being chased by the tiger, and his friend turns to him and goes, "We'll never outrun the tiger." And he goes, "I won't have to outrun the tiger. I just have to outrun you." Essentially, if you're more secure than 90% of other businesses, then they're going to go for those other businesses. So, think about what you can do. Do what you can. Don't worry about the stuff that's technically beyond you yet. Just take a note. Always remember, and then you can come back and update later. Consider disabling device discovery. Now, this one's an absolute pain in the bottom if you've got network printers and things like that, or if you're sharing local file systems and things like that on your network, but it's really worthwhile doing. If you get a breach by somebody onto one of your devices on your network, if you've disabled discovery on your network, then they can't see the other devices necessarily, not directly anyway. Don't allow guests onto your network. A lot of big companies have guest networks, so they don't actually hand out a password. They've actually just sort of got, this is a guest network as password or something. So they know it's insecure. They know it's prone to being breached, but it allows people to come into their office and get onto the guest network and access things like their printers and their peripherals, so that they can get to them if they really need to. It's about sort of federating. It's about dividing the amount of control that you're trusting people with. From a guest network, for example, you can't get to secure storage and stuff like that. Think about it. And ensure network passwords are long and complex. I've waffled on about that, so I won't do it again. Secure storage, patch again. Regularly backup data. So I know it should be data, and I'm English, so we've adopted the American as you would, but data backup, I can't stress how much you need that. So in the example with Doug, he didn't know whether or not his data had been changed there. He could have actually had edited data. He could have had totally broken data that actually would have opened him up for further leaks, further risk, etc. He could have had a database of all of these websites that he was using regularly, and unknown to him, he's actually going to the wrong websites now and putting in all his passwords. So if you think there is a breach, always go to your data backup. That can be something as insignificant as backup to cloud, which most devices have by default, because quite frankly, Microsoft and Apple want to make money off you, so does Google. Because as soon as you've filled up that storage, they go, we're going to charge you now, and they give you something like half a gig. It's paltry amount. So be careful about what you're backing up, but make sure you are backing up everything that you want. Encryption keys. So ensure they're valid. This for the geeks, really. it's so that your website's got HTTPS. There's something called Let's Encrypt, which I believe it's been bought by Google. I'm not sure, I'd have to check that, but they were previously totally funded by donations. But all they do is give out totally free encryption keys. So for all of the websites that I host, I've got this automatic thing that goes and checks for when the encryption key expires and grabs a new encryption key if it's coming up to expiry. It's absolutely fantastic, totally automated and totally free. So when somebody turns around and says, it's going to cost you $500 for an encryption key, don't believe them.
I've just posted it into chat, Alex, so thanks for that one. That one's gold.
You can manually do it as well. So you can download a Let's Encrypt key. You basically put in all of your website data and your company data, and it will generate one for you. The thing about keys is they're all predicated on trust, and Let's Encrypt is a trusted key source, which is fantastic.
And look, has that got to do with your HTTPS? So sometimes when you go onto a website, it says it's not secure.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So what you want to do is make sure your website doesn't have not secure next to it.
Absolutely spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I've waffled on about checking third-party code. So I go back.
There's a couple of questions in regards to servers here, and it's got to do with backups. So you mentioned that in point 2. So I think it was, I think it might have been Liz, or maybe it was, I think it was Bharati. In regards to the various devices and backing up, and I think Liz says that she backs up or puts a lot of information on USB. Now something's come out new about USB, and you spoke about that before. So what would you see from a backup, just from your experience, maybe from a small business point of view, would be a good pathway? So, we've got Dropbox, like Bharati mentioned Dropbox, I know I've got OneDrive. But then there's Google G Drive, so what for you would be a good pathway for what you would feel is a good backup system?
The ones you've mentioned, absolutely spot on. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. Put it this way, AWS, Amazon, they spent over 20 million on their infrastructure to get it right, to get it secure. If you've got a spare 20 million hanging around, feel free to make your own.
And I'd buy an island and live on it. I wouldn't.
Well, I joke, but I've actually had to have that conversation with customers. They've been going, we want to make our own cloud for our backup solution. And I've said, yeah, okay, well, if you've got 20 million, you can do something better than AWS. Yeah. Otherwise, spend the sort of 200K that they're asking per year to back up everything.
So really, if someone was using a hard drive at home, I've got 2 hard drives with lots of stuff on it that I do a backup to hard drive. But then I've got my OneDrive because it's connected to my Windows, right? So to me, that's my backup system. So if someone uses Dropbox, then that's a good system. If someone uses Google Drive, that's a good system too, knowing full well that the third-party provider you're using could get hacked as well, but that's... they're people that have invested 200 million in making sure that happens. It doesn't happen. So
CyberArk released a load of training, and in that training documentation, it actually says that 100% of the breaches that they have seen use credential faking. So that's somebody pretending to be you. So do watch out for that. My first question would be, Kathy, is any of it encrypted?
Okay, cool.
So you can encrypt things like Excel and Doc and PDF and stuff like that. There are options to do that. Google it online how to. It's really easy. And essentially with Excel, it asks for password protection and goes and encrypts it anyway. So it's great stuff.
Oh, yeah, great question, Bridie. Thank you for that.
But USBs.
Oh, USB. Liz mentioned putting on USBs because there has been some new data I noticed on LinkedIn the other day about USBs.
So 2 things. Number 1, have you encrypted your USB? If you haven't, encrypt your USB. If you don't know how to, then password protect files, then copy them to USB. You can use zip or RAR or whatever compression tool to encrypt as well. So if you've got a bunch of files, zip them and dump them onto USB. You can also set your system to automatically encrypt a whole load of stuff on a regular basis and put the file somewhere. That gets a little bit more technical, but I would say the easiest thing to do is to pay for a license for BitLocker if you can. So you can just automatically encrypt your USB devices. The second thing, there's been a sudden spike in breaches using USB devices. So this is out in industry. This is people who have put malware onto USB sticks. So you stick the USB stick into your computer and all of a sudden it reboots. What's happening is it's getting all of the decryption instructions from your computer, getting your password and login, and logging everything that you type. And it's installing that onto your system. So even when you take the USB stick out, it's still on there. It can also do it invisibly. So you put the USB in thinking it's a nice clean USB because you can't see the files on there. And all of a sudden you've got a whole load of malicious code on there. So watch out for USBs. Always clean them. I know, they're all out to get us. So as I've said, encryptorize if possible, encrypt data if possible. You can actually do both. Ensure firewalls are enabled. So if you've got a server sitting, I've got a lovely little Buffalo NAS drive, which sits there. It's got a couple of terabytes, and I use that as a backup. It's got a firewall on it, so make sure it's running. Scan your servers regularly. So I'm talking virus scan, file change scans. You might not have to do that if it's externally hosted or cloud. So here's a quick summary of all the stuff that you can do. I don't think I covered VPN actually, sorry about that. There's a lot of commercially available VPN things. I've put later on in the slides all of the best stuff that you can get. I've gone to those links and checked that they are actually good VPNs. And
so Alex, again, I'm a doobie. What's a VPN?
Virtual private network.
Cool. Wow.
So what it means is everything between you and where you're going to is encrypted. So when you're sitting alone in McDonald's, if you're using a VPN, because they use open and clear text networks, what's happening is everything's visible on that network. So if you've got your VPN enabled, then it will go through that network encrypted, so you've got that layer of security. As I say, these are all layers. Just having a VPN doesn't guarantee security of your data. People can grab and download packets that are encrypted and then decrypt them in their own time later. And the faster CPUs get, the quicker it is to actually decrypt stuff. It's not just something that Hollywood throws into its movies, but it doesn't quite look the way that it does. I've given you a quick summary of everything that I've covered on this slide, so feel free to refer back to this. I'm not going to cover it all again. Here's all of the tools. So one of the scanners that I particularly love is OWASP. It's free, it's open source. You can just grab a copy and fire it off looking at your server. There's also Nmap, NMAP, which is something that is free distribution open source again on most Linux and Unix servers. So you can use those to scan servers. We've talked about antivirus. App hardening. There's the government's ASCS site, which talks about app hardening, which is quite a good read. Worthwhile for the non-technical, gives you a good solid introduction. VPNs we've talked about, and cloud. So I've found the top Australian cloud solutions, but we've covered most of those. None of these have got a huge price tag. So for $100, you could actually see your cybersecurity go from 0 to pretty much hero. All right, so don't be scared by prices. You might have to spend a bit of time learning little bits and pieces like terminology, but you've done that today. You've started your investment, so learn a little bit more. break down the problem, do one bit at a time. You can even sort of say, this week, I'm going to do one thing to make my company more secure, and just do that one thing. What now? So document, communicate, enforce, and monitor. So document, just write something, anything. I've given you an example here. It's essentially one line. It's very to the point. It's saying, as a policy, our security policy is we're going to back up regularly. We're not going to click on those suspicious links we get by text and email. If you ever receive any links, even if it looks like it's come from Amazon, which is a big one, don't trust it. Go to the Amazon website, log in there, because when you click on the link, it can either fire up a piece of code that listens in the background. So although you've gone to the Amazon website, there's something sitting there logging all of your keystrokes. If you do see that it's gone to a dodgy URL or a dodgy site, just close down the window straight away. If you're working alongside a cybersecurity company, then report it to them. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that getting insurance is actually enough to cover you. If you do get breached, you've already pretty much lost your company. So is the cybersecurity going to give you a brand new, is the insurance going to give you a brand new one? Probably not. So communicate, make sure everybody in your company knows what your policy is. Link to it everywhere. Again, doesn't have to be world-class, doesn't have to be groundbreaking, doesn't have to be War and Peace. Just one line saying, we don't do stupid stuff. We take precautions. Enforce. So one company I worked for, it was a company that was across the UK and America, who managed gas pipelines and things like that. So their policy said, we consider it to be gross misconduct to walk away from your computer without locking the screen. One day, I came into the office with somebody who had gone out for lunch, and security was waiting for them to take them off site because they'd forgotten to lock their laptop and they'd left it open. Some companies are and have to be extremely harsh about this stuff. You don't have to be, but it can give you an extra piece of leverage if you say, we consider it to be gross misconduct. Doesn't mean you have to enforce it, but it gives people that hint that you are serious about security, that if they take customer data, if they are responsible for a breach in any way, that you consider it as a really big offense. Banning users. So again, this is a bit more of middle ground. You don't have to just cart people off site. What you could do is say, okay, we're going to lock your accounts. We're not going to allow you access to customer data. It's going to make your life and your job harder. You can also reduce privileges. So we'll allow you onto your account, but you're not going to be able to edit anything anymore. You can actually twist this any way you want. You could actually say for vendors, remember, this can go in your vendor contracts as well. For vendors, you could say that there are financial remunerations. You could say that for your staff, they'll lose a certain amount of their pay. This is all about carrot and stick. We reward you for doing good things. We punish you for doing bad things. It's up to you how much you enforce that. Monitor. So test your people, test your systems. Again, doesn't have to be onerous. You can employ companies like mine who will send out spam emails to your staff and to your vendors, and you can see whether or not they've clicked on the spam links. The spam links don't actually do anything other than go, ha, gotcha, and log who it was who put in their password and their username. There's actually a test on my site. If you go to resources at the bottom, it's called How Cyber Secure. And actually the first page has got a whole load of user credentials that it asks you to put in. I don't actually even take those credentials and do anything with them. But what it does is it goes, yeah, you're being marked down for putting those into a web form. So, a bit of a cheeky one that I've put in there. Learn how to track how good your staff and how good your vendors are. Remember, you can use things like data analytics tools. They're not just for how well performing your websites are. They're also how well performing your honeypots are. What honeypots are, it's something that looks attractive that you're trying to encourage people to go and click on because you believe that they're malicious or that they're trying to do the wrong thing. So, summary: take action or take the gamble. It's your choice. Allowing access can kill your business. Okay, do sensible things. Do the small things that you can do today. Do the easy things. Let's face it, from the report that has just come out about local government in Australia, most of them have got severe security issues. Quite frankly, they're going to be taking it more seriously, which means they're going to be running faster than you if you take no actions.
Well, there's lots of questions, Alex. So if you want to stop sharing, then I'll put a few questions through so we can go and they can see us in full volume. Now, I'm mindful of time, so those that might want to leave, feel free to do so. And this is being recorded, so if you want to come to Q&A after, please do that when the recording's shared with you. So, okay. So a couple of questions we've got here is, the first one a while ago, and we'll keep them a bit brief because of time, is that do you know anywhere there's face-to-face courses that are simple in regards to cybersecurity and, like just really early learning things that people can put in place at the same time that they're actually face-to-face with people? So have you heard of anything? Like obviously, maybe Sydney. I don't know if Barati's in Sydney. So, but do you know of anything like that?
I don't at the moment, and the issue right now is with COVID. So a lot of things are moving online. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, but it might be something. If you're happy with virtual face-to-face, where you can do roundtable discussion, tell us what you're interested in. We'll go find something.
Cool. I'll ask that question on the email if that's okay. That'll follow up with the recording. The next question that have come through at the moment is Paul Mooney has asked, do you recommend external IT service assessments for security? And if so, how frequently? And he says that they're too small to employ an IT department at the moment. So,
actually, this is something that I've done for some of my customers. I recommend at least doing it when you start up a contract with an external company. So, your vendor assessment should be done at least once. I'm sorry to say that some of the FTSE 100 companies don't even do that. So if you do it once, then great. I would say annually is good. If you can afford to do it monthly, even better. But remember that these are risks, and you should manage them as risks. So for anyone who's new to risk management, take a note of it. Write down how much you think it would cost to fix. Write down how much you're risking if you do nothing. Okay, and also take notes about what plans you're putting in place in order to mitigate and reduce the risk as much as possible.
Cool. Look, there was a question from, I can't see the name up at the moment, but are there any settings in Instagram and Facebook that we should have to protect them against ransomware and hackers? So, yeah.
Yes, there are. So social media is a great one. And actually, I've done a slide deck about how easy it is to give away all of your credentials. People put photos in there. Sort of, here's a photo with me in front of my house. Oh, it's my lovely new house. Oh, look, there's the house number in the background. And a little bit of trolling on your profile and, trawling through and going to Google Maps, and they've suddenly got your street name. And so they've got your full address. They now know your name as well. And that's essentially all they need to be able to start gathering other information. And how often is it that people start going, hey, happy birthday? And oh God, Facebook's terrible for it. It even reminds everybody, hey, it's that person's birthday. I put the wrong birthday in deliberately. And everybody wishes me happy birthday. And I just go, yeah, thanks.
So the other question from Dee is, what are some issues to keep in mind where you allow customers to access your website to update pictures content on their profile page?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So Dee must have a website where she allows her customers to actually go into her website and update their details. So it's a bit
Right.
like when I was with the Chamber of Commerce that we would allow people to come in and update their business profile for one of
So
them.
this is proprietary code then. So it's something that you've paid for somebody else to go and grab. Um, it's really difficult because once you've got something that's personal, if it's Wix, then great, then it's Wix that actually looks after all that sort of stuff. If it's some other big vendor, then you've got the controls and the protection from them. If you're going to private vendors, it's much more difficult, and you might want to employ somebody to go through and have a look at the code. They don't have to spend weeks and weeks. It's normally a couple of days that they'll spend going through the code and making sure. They'll do a raft of security tests. I'd suspect it would cost somewhere around $2,000. I've not paid for it recently, so no worth going out to industry. But if I were asked to do it, I'd quote somewhere around $2,000 just to go through and do a thorough assessment. You can also pay a lot less money to do a much lighter assessment. So if it's just a bit of a prod and a poke and a penetration test from an automated tool, you can get it for less than $200.
Yeah. So Paul's asked another question, and there's two more coming through. So thanks for the questions. Great. This is great. Thank you.
I'll have to speed up. Sorry.
Yeah, a lot of small businesses use home offices, therefore address shows on Google. And I was exactly what Paul, I was thinking the same thing. So is there any way around this? And I really fought with Google to have my house pixelated. But I actually ended up dropping a pin somewhere else. I just dropped it in the middle of town. So
if you can, that's the perfect solution.
Yeah.
Google are actually catching up on this. And interestingly, it was mentioned in another BEC webinar that I was watching. So I've done this myself. You can untick allowing sharing of your address. So I've done that, so I'm protected. You can also, I've actually had to register my address because I wanted the little slip that comes through from Google to say, yay, this is your real business. So I've said, don't allow people to see exactly where my business is.
Yeah.
You can also, you don't have to put your address details in there at all. So, you can go in and edit them afterwards and delete them and all sorts. That's probably the safest. But yeah, Google are getting wise to this. They're starting to realize that there's actually a lot of remote companies that don't actually have a physical business presence.
Yeah.
This is what COVID's done for us.
Yeah, and I noticed a change in the last 18 months, to be honest, because when I first went onto Google about 2.5 years ago, I couldn't stop my photo coming up and, my picture of my house. And so that's where I was complaining a lot to them. So thanks for that question, Paul. That was great. So D May's asked again, is there a plugin in WordPress recommended for, so is WordPress, because it's like Wix and it's like Shopify, because there was a question about Shopify as well. These guys take your customer data, so they have to have pretty strict cybersecurity in place. But we have seen a number of large organizations that have had cyber breaches. So it is going to happen. So you need to have a plan for if it happens. From your third-party provider. So, but, are there plugins or anything else that you can actually do to secure yourself that little step further?
There are. I use WordPress for my blog. One of the biggest things I've noticed on my web server is a lot of requests going to wp-admin.php, which is your login page, and they keep going through. Now, what I've actually done on my server is I've allowed them to request that and send passwords and usernames on there. I've made sure that my password is complex. I've also not used the admin account, so I've used that as a honeypot. I've also got something that traps the IP addresses that keep sending requests, and then it locks them out. So I've created my own blacklist. There are additional plugins. I would have to look them up, but if you go to the plugin store in WordPress, then you can just do a search.
Cool. I think that's all the questions. If anyone thinks that I haven't answered a question for them, but in wrap up, thanks heaps for Alex. That was great. I know I learned something new, and we're going out putting my cybersecurity risk assessment because I'm a bit risk averse. So look, what will happen is after this webinar, we'll wait for the actual rewind to happen, and then I'll send you an email. I'll also connect you with Alex, because as you can tell, he is a plethora of information, and I haven't used that word for a long time. And look, if there's something that you want to sort of, as a group sort of go, hey, Alex, we'd like to know more over here, then I'm sure he'd be happy to help you as well. So thanks, Alex, and it's been great having the first webinar with you. Hopefully, we can do a few more into the future.
Excellent.
And so yeah, very useful. So thank you, many thanks. So lots of thanks. So well done to you, Alex.
Thanks for attending, everyone.
Yeah. So the email will come out by the end of today. And look, just keep on going on with cybersecurity. It's like anything with business. You got to do your books. You got to do your marketing, you got to do your cybersecurity. So just bring it in as one of those things as a small business owner you just have to do. Okay, I'm just checking, there might have been just, okay, Alex's cheat sheet, yep, D, that'll be through as well with the email afterwards. So, and also Alex's details, how about you follow him on LinkedIn? So if you're on LinkedIn, follow him or give him a shout out. Are you on any social media, Alex, or are you just LinkedIn mainly?
All of the social media, yeah. If you go to zbinary.com, scroll down to the bottom, I've got a social media list down there. I'm actually also on Instagram for no apparent reason, but
And he's also got a few cheat things on his website as well, so check those out. And I'll send the link to the one about you filling in data that you shouldn't be filling in. Okay, everyone, it's great to see you all again. Love doing these webinars, and thank you very much, Alex. It's been a blast. So have a great rest of the day. Those in lockdown, stay safe. Try not to go too mad if you're in proper lockdown, and we'll see you again soon. See you. Thanks, Alex. Talk again soon.
Bye-bye.
See ya.